Hey guys, we are in section 2 of Unit 1 this week. We're going to work on our writing skills, more specifically creative writing. So get your creative juices flowing, and here we go. So what is creative writing? Well, you're using your imagination to create something unique. It can be fiction writing, it can be in the form of poetry, it can even be creative nonfiction. So you're just creating something more imaginative than just plain old nonfiction writing like you would in an article or an autobiography, things like that. So the opposite of creative writing would be technical writing, and that's journalism, advertisements, reference materials, basically boring things. So that you know what I'm talking about when we're talking about creative writing, I wrote down an example for you. There it was, finally, our island, our very own island. It looked beautiful above the waves of fog, but there was still one question to be answered. Why had they sold it to us for only $5? So I use this example because it has all of the elements that we're going to be looking at in the next few slides, all of the elements that you're going to need when you're writing your own creative writing essay. It doesn't give away too many details, but it does give away enough details like the beautiful island, the waves of fog, so that you can picture what's going on. And that's a really big thing that creative writing includes. So let's talk about that. The whole purpose of creative writing is to entertain. You want to entertain your audience, whoever is reading your story. It can be laughter, it can be sad, they could be angry, but they're reading solely to entertain. Now, creative writing can also take other forms. You can educate your audience while you're doing that. You can spread awareness about a certain topic, for example, global warming, or you can express your own thoughts. So those kind of all go together if you think about it, to educate, to spread awareness, to express one's thoughts. So you can include that in an entertainment story because you could include some details about that. For example, you could have your main character living in a futuristic world where pollution is overwhelming, and that's a big obstacle or conflict that your main character faces. So it can be a funny story, it can be a sad story. You're still entertaining, but you're spreading awareness about pollution, whether your audience knows it or not. They're going to get some knowledge, so they're going to be educated on pollution, because I'm sure you're going to include some details on how the world got so polluted, and maybe what the character's doing to fight that or living with the pollution. And you're expressing your own thoughts too, because you wouldn't be writing about that topic if you didn't feel deeply about that topic. So all of those can kind of flow together, but mainly creative writing is to entertain. So let's look at the main elements of creative writing. And I'm sure that you have probably jumped back to the slide if you were on your creative writing final assignment for this section. These are the elements that I'm going to have you choose from, but you can look at the creative writing directions to know more of that. So this is the slide that you are wanting. The 6 main components that we're going to be talking about in creative writing are imagery, elaboration, build-up, diction, contrast, and audience. So I'm sure that you know what these are, just in general. You've definitely heard of imagery and diction and audience in language arts last year and the year before. We've talked about it a lot. But we'll look at the definitions more specifically in the next slides so that you can choose some of these elements to include in your own creative writing. So the first one's imagery. It's a noun. Imagery means to create mental pictures. It's a product of imagination. So what I mean by that is, don't just tell us a story, let us see the story. Let us see it in our minds as if we are there with the character experiencing everything that they are. So of course you want to include a lot of details for that so we can paint our own picture of what's happening at that very moment in the story. Include everything, even if you think it's something so small and irrelevant. I bet that it will be relevant for the audience to picture what's happening. So include it. The next element is elaboration. And I mean this as an adjective. You're including things that are complex, that are full of details, that include orateness. So you're elaborating on the story and explaining what happened and not just telling us what happened. So again, give all those details that I talked about in imagery, and even include the minor ones. You want to make sure that your story isn't plain and boring. You want to make it complex and intricate. Elaborate on what's going on. The next element in creative writing is build up. Build up means to develop gradually by increments, but this makes it sound more difficult than what it is. What I mean by build up in creative writing is building upon each event. Build, build, build this event, and then it created this event, and it just making it more complex in general. So remember your plot diagrams that we've worked on for the last few years. You should be well aware of the plot diagrams, and I'm talking about the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. In the build-up, I'm focusing more on the climax, the main event of the story. This is the highest point. This is what the reader waits to read. This is where the conflict is, resolving itself, but there's a lot going on so that it can resolve itself. So you don't want to give away this main event, this climax, at the beginning or even the middle of your story. You want to wait until the end, because if you have it in the beginning or the middle, your reader's going to be done. There's nothing that they're waiting for, and they're going to simply close the book and put it away. You want to build on all of those details that you are including, all the events that led up to the main event. Build upon them, let the reader wait, and then surprise them with the main event, the climax. Make it worth their while. Next is diction. This is a term that you should know by now. Diction is your choice of words. So you want to use great diction, obviously, in your creative writing, same as any essay that we do. Choose your words wisely. Make yourself sound more educated than you might think that you are, even though all of you are educated. Use thesaurus.com. So, for example, instead of saying that a character is very mad, choose delirious. Instead of saying that a character is frustrated, choose disheartened. Use more complex vocabulary. It makes your story sound a lot better. Element number 5 is contrast, and you've heard the term contrast before. That's comparing differences between two things. You're contrasting one thing to another by stating its differences. Remember, compare and contrast. Compare is comparing the similarities. Contrast is comparing the differences. You know all this. But when I'm talking about creative writing, the best way to explain contrast is by examples. So let me read you a few. A student writing about her grandmother creates a powerful picture showing the reader what she had been like before and after her stroke. You're contrasting the differences in the character's grandmother so that we can better understand why how she acts now might not be how the character is used to her acting, and that could be important in the story. So including before and after her stroke is a contrast. Another example would be a student used the following sentence to contrast images and feelings. Grandma's long brown casket with gold trim looked soft and comfortable, but she looked uncomfortable and arranged. So in this aspect, the student chose to contrast how things literally, how the character literally saw things versus how the character felt, and that can bring about different feelings and images in the reader. So it's good to use contrast in examples like that as well. And that leads us to our last element in creative writing, which is audience. That's your reader who's reading your story. So when you're writing, your main focus should be on how the audience feels about your story. I mean, you are writing it for them. And I am your audience too, so you're also writing it for me. So I want to be able to enjoy your story, and so does your reader. And to do that, you want to create something that happens within your audience. You want to cause something to happen in them, whether it be a lump in their throat, a tear in their eye, a laugh out loud moment. I want to feel something when I'm reading your story. I don't want to just simply read it, give a grade, put it down. And someone that is choosing to read it, like a friend or a relative, I don't want to just read it and say, oh, great writing, that you used great grammar and you chose great words. It needs to have a purpose in it. You need to affect your audience, leave a lasting impression on them. The best way to do this is to make your story relatable. If you include a setting or maybe an emotion that your audience may have experienced before, then they're more likely to connect to it and feel something from that story. So, for example, if you talked about the first day of school and your character is saying everything that went on their first day of school, there were some life-changing moments, there were some nerve-wracking moments. No matter what it is, I can relate to that because I've had first days of school before, and so have your friends and your family members. And so those things that you're going to mention, the nerve-wracking moments, the life-changing moments, I'm going to remember my own. And I'm going to think, oh yeah, I remember when I started ninth grade. This thing happened and I slipped, and oh my gosh, I will never forget that. It was so embarrassing, but it made me a lot of friends too. So I'll remember that, I'll connect to it, and I'll like your story even more. So that's it for creative writing. If you have any questions, let me know. Good luck on your own creative writing, and I so look forward to seeing what you come up with and reading it.